Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that allows you to better understand the world around you. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach.
And I'm Anika Madden, and I'm a parent. It is Thursday, October 31st, and welcome to episode number 92. What is the media not saying about college admissions? This week, more major breaking news. ACT change will allow students to retake individual sections. And we're in chapter 92 of 171 answers, and we're talking about the college admissions secrets that the media is not telling you. And this week's question is from a mom who wants to know if her daughter's strategy of inviting admissions counselors to visit her relatively new high school is a good one. And Mark continues his interview with Peter Van Buskirk in Understanding How Colleges Act as Businesses in Ways That Are Not in Your Best Interests, Part 3.
Anika, for our admissions tip for the week, it is understanding the 4 different demonstrateds. You know what I'm talking about here?
A demonstrated interest.
That's one.
Okay.
Demonstrated interest. That's one.
I thought you
That's
meant...
one of the 4. What are the other 3?
I thought
you thought you were all smart. You thought you're all smart.
Okay, I'm done.
You got the first base. You got to get to home plate. So there's demonstrated interest, showing the school some love, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got demonstrated knowledge. That's showing that you have a knowledge of the school.
Okay.
You've got demonstrated understanding. These are all terms admissions use, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
That you show that you get who we are. And I was just reviewing a Georgia Tech application for one of my students earlier today, and they gave a little pointer in there by the college-specific essay. They said, we are looking for demonstrated authenticity. Number 4.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Understand the 4 demonstrateds. And for our admissions vernacular, our word of the day is melted. What do you think melted is, Anika?
My brain, as of right now.
Ice cream cone? Yeah, because we're recording at 10 o'clock or almost 10.
Good gracious.
What do you think melted is?
It can't be positive. I mean,
does it sound like a compliment? Is that what you're trying to say?
It's not. No.
You want to take a stab?
Yeah, my brain. I'm done after that. I don't know.
Okay. So do you remember how we did a whole thing on summer melt?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's the verb form. Oh, this kid melted.
Goodness.
This kid melted. Melted refers to you just think of the same way you think of an ice cube or an ice cream. He went away.
Oh.
He went away. So it's a student that was enrolled and they never showed up. They melted.
No, I don't like
Yep,
that.
you're right. Well, you're right. It's not a positive. Our college spotlight later, we will be looking at the flagship school for Kentucky, the University of Kentucky. And Anika, I cannot wait to get into this because it's like we're doing breaking news on steroids. I don't know what's a bigger story. You know what? NACAC, new policies regarding recruitment, or probably this. This is the one that will impact more students. Let's put it that way. So why don't you kick it off? Let's kick off our conversation. Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right. So the breaking article, ACT change will allow students to retake individual sections. And this is written in the New York Times by Miss Anemona Hartocollis. And so, big deal, starting September 2020, students who want to improve their ACT scores will be able to retake single sections of the 5-part ACT test instead of taking all of them again. So currently, if a kid wants to improve their math score, they have to sit and take every single last section again. That's a big deal. And in addition to that, the students are now going to have the ability to superscore their results. So Mark, you got to correct me on this to make sure I get it right. So if I made a high score in math on my first time I took the test, but I took my best score in science on the second time I took the test, and I can combine those scores and submit it to my schools.
Correct.
And then so the article does, however, highlight the fact that it's not clear whether these, colleges with this new, big change, whether they're going to evaluate applicants whether a super score, doing the super scoring or doing a composite score on one exam, if that's going to be a distinction between how they evaluate students. So, Mark, first of all, my question is, why hasn't it always been this way? I mean, there seems to be a shift in the admissions universe, obviously, with all this breaking news that we have, all these major things that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the real motive? Like, why now?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the ACT really responding to?
All right, so that's a great question. So let's give some context. So the SAT had been the dominant test. SAT came around in 1926, ACT 1959. And the SAT had the most market share in the country. The SAT had dominated on the coast, East and West Coast. ACT had dominated because it was an Iowa-based test. It dominated in the Midwest and certain southern states, right? However, that was slowly changing. The ACT being more the content test, historically the SAT being more the aptitude test. In 2012, the ACT overtook the SAT as the number one test in the country. That was a big deal. That had never happened before. And then from 2012 all the way through 2018, that gap was widening. I mean, it got to the point where, even when it overtook it, and it was like neck and neck, right? Like 50.1 market share to 49.9. But the growth, the gap between the ACT and the SAT got up to 400,000 more ACT test takers in a year. And then that's when the SAT came back and did the redesign in 2016 and completely relaunched the test and got rid of a lot of different things, got rid of the guessing penalty, went down to 4 options and not 5, dropped the writing section, shortened the time. I mean, all those changes. We're not here to talk about the redesigned SAT. But the reason why I'm sharing all this is I want people to understand the intense competition between these two tests for market share. And by the way, when the SAT did the redesign, it overtook this year the ACT again. And one of the things the smart thing that the SAT did in the redesign was they made sure that they lined the test up with Common Core in the state in terms of their curriculum. And the way they really surged was they got these state-based contracts. Because that's how the ACT really passed the SAT. It was getting these state-based contracts where the state was using this test as their main, test to test content knowledge. And so you take the test in school during the school day. And so the SAT fought back by aligning with Common Core to get even more contracts. So this summer, when the SAT launched Environmental Context Dashboard, which then morphed into Landscape, and a few first-time listeners, if you don't know what we're talking about, we literally did 4 episodes or 3 on Environmental Context Dashboard, and then I did a recommended resource more recently on Landscape. This was something that the colleges really, really love, and all the talk was, what is the ACT going to do? And the ACT was not giving any indication that we're definitely following you. So I was wondering how that was going to work. Now I know why they were quiet, because they knew what they were about to roll out. Now, I've been hearing for a while that it was just a matter of time before they went to an online version, right? Because they've been testing this internationally, and they said they were going to do it. But I was expecting the roll to be 2 or 3 years from now. So there's several really, really, really big components in this. One is the ability to take the test online. That's huge. Another one, and this is going to be really welcome, 2-day turnaround time on your scores, Anika, instead of 13 days. That's going to be major when you're trying to figure out what you're going to plan. So I do love the online scoring because, the online test taking, because that opens up a lot of, just makes it more practical for the student. And I love the 2-day turnaround time. I also have mixed feelings on taking single sections. There's a part of it I like.
Really?
Yeah, there's a part of it I like. I like the fact that you can go in and take the thing and probably be in and out in an hour, right? And so it doesn't take 5 hours out of your Saturday. So I love that. And I also love the fact that if you've done really well, and let's say you've done really well and you're reading in your English section and your math section, but not your science, you can just focus only on your science. So I love that. Here's my one negative about this. And the ACT was brilliant. Like from a marketing standpoint, this is like a slam dunk. No, it's winning the slam dunk competition, then winning the home run derby. And no, you're not a sports person, but what can I come up with?
Stop saying that. I'm getting
that's
better.
Right. Your boys are
every
getting.
time.
Yeah, I do. You got 2 men in your house that are making you become. I keep forgetting they're converting you. If you're following me, then you pass the test. So no, I cannot imagine a better marketing. I don't know what the SAT is going to do, because it's going to be extremely attractive online testing. It's going to be extremely attractive 2-day turnaround time. I'm going to predict right now that the SAT will drastically change its turnaround time. It does not have to take as long as it takes right now to run some stuff through computer grids.
I was already thinking that, right?
There's going to be so many advantages to that. Now, here's the one thing. Well, let me ask you this. What do you think I might not like about it?
I can't imagine, and I'm anxious for you to say it, because I'm like, how could you possibly? I have no idea. Please give it to us.
Well, this was one quote in the article that I agree with. It says, I worry that most of the high achieving kids and this is a college counselor talking about, in my orbit, will retest and retest until they bump subsections of 34 and up to 33 and 35 and 36. So standardized testing will become even more of an extracurricular activity than it already is. So I think this is going to fuel the test prep industry. I think it's going to create some more even class divide, and I think it's going to create some more score. Basically, what that was very well put. Sally Rubenstein, very well put. Like, if you can just now go in and take and do one section, hey, I'll do this thing 6 times, 8 times. Prep courses, wow, specializing here and there, because it's bite-sized doses, so it's going to seem more manageable for people to take that on. And so my concern is it's going to make test prep even more of a central part of this process. And so I'm not saying I don't like it, because I definitely like the online testing, and I definitely like the 2-day turnaround. And I also like I think the idea of being able to take an individual section is pretty good. But I would hope that there'd be some way where there'd be, I don't know, it'd be hard to do this without having to move away from score choice. But let's say you got 3 shots at taking it rather than unlimited times. Because I just think, because it's a shorter test, it's going to have people thinking, I'm just going to go back. It's only an hour of my day. And now they're going to be taking the test like 6 times instead of once or twice. That's what I don't like. And I also think it's going to fuel test prep in a way that's going to, once again, bridge the gap, or not bridge the gap. It's going to have the antithesis effect it's going to accentuate the gap between the haves and have-nots when it comes to resources, because of super expensive test preps courses that'll emerge for, like this amazing science. Anyway, you were trying to say something like a minute ago. Let me just stop and listen.
No. That's okay, because that was one of my 2 questions for you. So the first one was that if the kids are able to take that one section, do you think the pricing is going to be the same? Like, do I have to pay the cost
of the full test? Really good question, because that's the first thing that I thought. These are businesses. So I thought, they've come up with a brilliant business idea. Now, mind you, the ACT is not. It's like $52, right? It's not like an AP test. It's not the end of the world for most people, and there are waivers out there. Although I wish they wouldn't be so chintzy with the waivers. There are waivers out there, but your income has to be so low to qualify. But that's another side. That's another point. So they have already come out, Anika, and said that they're not going to charge the $52, because that's the pushback they got right away. Oh, good. This is going to be a moneymaker for you. You're going to have people go in there and take it 6 times and get $300 out of a family. They're not saying how much they are going to charge, but I think they're going to make a boatload of money. Watch them come back and say, we're not charging 52, we're charging 48.
For $51.99.
Yeah. I'm sure they won't be that craven, just because there's a lot of scrutiny on them right now. And so, or crass, I should say. But I think that who knows what they're going to do, but I know they're going to make a boatload of money. Like, off the average family is going to spend more off of this. And so, there's a part of me that says, okay, you know what? So if you take the test more times, but it's 1 hour out of your day as opposed to 5 hours, at least it doesn't dominate your day. But what I don't like is, I feel like I can convince most of the families that I work with to take this test 2 times and be done with it. And in some instances 3, but not more than that. Now it's going to be like, I can just keep going back to the well. It's only an hour of my day. That's what I don't like.
So, but here's my second question. Yeah. So that the statement in this article where it says that it's not clear how colleges are going to view the kids taking it multiple times. How do you see that trend going? Like, do you think the schools are going to say, we're actually going to put more emphasis on the kids that take it one time as opposed to 3 or 4?
So the way they would do that would be they'd have it's called score choice, right? Whether you can
Right.
choose to submit your scores or not, or you have to send the whole battery. And when you have to send the whole battery, you don't know how a school is holding it against you, what they're concluding when they see someone taking it 7 times versus 2. I think there'll be a little bit of an increase of people moving away from score choice. But here's the thing, score choice is extremely popular with students and parents. And so most of the time people don't like to do things that are unpopular. Right. So I think there'll be some schools that will say, okay, we're not going to be able to do score choice anymore because I want to know. I want to know if you've taken science 8 times and I'm trying to compare you to this kid who's taken it once. I want to know that. So I think I don't know the answer to your question, Anika, but I think that because on the one hand, I think that schools are going to think, yeah, I do want to know that. But on the other hand, it's not popular to get rid of score choice. And when you're trying to, attract students, doing things that they don't like is not always, a good move. So that's a tricky one.
But is that a question for the admissions rep?
No, each individual school will come up with their own policy after much deliberation and, and consultation and even research. But I'm going to make a prediction that not that many schools will drop score choice. Okay. I'm going to admit that. Now, what I think may be more likely is the question you brought out earlier, which is a school going to accept the super score? See, one of the things the ACT did in here as well is every school individually decides whether they super score the SAT or ACT, right? But a much higher percentage of schools super scored the SAT. So that was one of the knocks against the ACT for people. Well, a lot of my schools don't super score you. I can take the SAT. So now they're building a super score right into their reporting. But there may be schools that say, we're not going to look at your super score. We're going to look at the highest cumulative score that you get in one sitting. But even there, it's unlikely because schools want to have the highest scores in all of the guidebooks and to go to all the ranking guides. So they're going to do what's in their best interest, which is normally going to be submit the highest scores. So I think that'll be very few. The schools that would do that kind of thing will be normally the most established brands with the most name recognition and the most wealth and the most money that can afford to do that kind of thing without losing applicants. But what about you, Nico? So did you see any negatives when you read it, or was it all good news?
To me, it's all good news.
Yeah.
Of course, if it boils down to that school that's going to judge me on that, going in and taking it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, whatever. I think the cost is going to drive concern or not. So
yeah, I don't see that as a big deal. It's $52 for the test. Even if someone takes it 5 times, that's a lot for a poor family. And I don't want to minimize that. And they've already said the price will be lower. People do spend money on that. They'll go get a weave or do something for a prom and they'll spend crazy money when they really want something. So my biggest concern is test score obsession. Test score obsession is a concern for me. Test score obsession, and then the same thing I brought up last week, furthering the gaps between the haves and the have-nots, because now all these mega expensive micro-targeted prep classes that are just an English section, just a math, just a science section are going to seem, I think, really going to be popular for families to enroll in because of the fact that, I don't have to sit for the test that long and I only need this one component or this one sub-score to go up. And so to me, I do see this furthering the gap between the well-resourced and the less resourced. And those things that always do that trouble me a little bit, maybe a lot, depending on how egregious it is. So it's mixed. I give it a mixed review, but what I will give it A++++ is from a marketing standpoint, it doesn't get much more brilliant than this. Online 2-day return, and I say an hour test because there's still going to be some explanation. Actually, to tell you the truth, with online, it's not even going to be that much explanation. I mean, this literally could be 45 minutes in and out, maybe even less.
All right. I am truly baffled as to why SAT takes so long.
Well,
Get those darn scores back.
They both taken 13 days. It's gotten a lot less, Anika. When I was, SAT and ACT proctor, it used to be a lot longer. They've gotten down to 13 days now, which is When I hear 13 days, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is just way better than it used to be.
Mm,
But on the other
wow.
hand, for stuff, if you're running a Scantron through a computer grid, it doesn't have to be that long. But they've got their checks and balances. But one thing, and I've always been cynical about this, why it's taken long, they had set this thing up in a way, let's say the ACT or the SAT are offered back-to-back months, right? Back-to-back months. They've got the thing set up in a way where by the time you find out what your test scores are, you don't have the ability to wait and see what your scores are and then sign up for the next month if your scores aren't good enough. I've always thought that was a bit of a scam. They force you to have to sign up before you get your test scores back, or you incur late fees. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. This is sure to be a massive buzz in college admissions, and is such a brilliant move by the ACT that I kind of feel that they're forcing the SAT's hand. I do not think, if the SAT thinks offering a landscape, which colleges like, but remember, it's still the individuals out there that are paying for the test. If they think that's going to be enough to counteract the increased market share, I think that's going to come to the ACT from this move, they're sadly mistaken. Here's what I think what will happen. One, the SAT will reduce its turnaround time. No question about that to me. Two, the SAT is going to come up with their own online version very, very quickly. I mean, they've been doing beta testing too, but the ACT has been ahead of where the SAT is on that. But the SAT is going to have to accelerate and come up with something online. It's just too convenient for people. And the SAT's got a big ego. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on the SAT and David Coleman and those people to come up with the, just doing a single section. But it's harder for the SAT. Here's the thing. The SAT's got evidence-based reading and writing, right? And it's got math. So even if they broke the test up, it still would be a lot longer than it would take to do the ACT. And the SAT doesn't like to follow the ACT. They don't like to do that. They have a lot of institution. It's just, I don't know. This is going to be tough. I don't know how they counter this one, Anika. Let's stay tuned and watch.
To be continued.
Oh, we're going to have breaking news next week or what? 3 weeks in a row. I think we went about 30 weeks without any breaking news.
You better find some.
Well, don't put it on me. You find it. You find it. You know what? Thank our listeners, because I don't think I could ever, I try to be plugged in to the main sources out there, but I don't think I could ever miss breaking news because our listeners send us these great articles, all the time on these new things. And I love it because, one, sometimes they're sending me a different article than I'm reading. And then I know one of these times they're going to send me something that I missed, and I'm going to be, like, oh, this is amazing. So keep sending them our way, everybody.
Keep it coming.
A lot of people sent us this article this week. This was good.
We need one for next week, y'all.
Yeah, put the pressure on our listeners. Put on them. Start talking smack to them, not me.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends, we are 1 week away from our last chapter focused on getting in for a while. We've been in the getting in section from episode 29 all the way to 93. And next week we transition to show me the money. Everything you need to know about the money. 70 weeks in a row on the money on this portion of our podcast. But our question today is, what's the secret about college admissions the media isn't telling me? Anika, you read the chapter. What were your takeaways?
Basically what it boils down to is that the media is all on top of these schools that are highly selective. It's all about, the school only accepted 2 people out of 5 billion applications. And the fact that they're not focused on the 3,000 plus schools in the country that exist, and only 200 of them are really selective. So, and I get that, I kind of sort of get it, but I also don't get the fact that, people are seeking valuable information that's going to help them. So to me, it should be the opposite of what's happening. It seems like they should be talking about the schools that are more accessible. Like that should be the breaking news. Like, oh my God, there's so much opportunity here. Go get it. Like, I don't get that. Like, what's up with that?
Yeah, so let's just fill it in. Let's paint the picture a little clear so everybody's following this really clearly. So what the media is not telling you is that it's a buyer's market, not a seller's market out there. You hear all the hype. You hear about how UCLA had 120,000 applications for the class of 2021, which is true, counting their, they have the UC app for University of California, so that generates like crazy amounts, right? Because all the UCs were they weren't the only one over 100,000. And you hear about Stanford and Harvard and their 5% acceptance rates, and you hear about Yale and Columbia and Princeton and Chicago and how they're right on the heels of Stanford and Harvard. And all those things are articles that pop all the time. You're constantly hearing those kinds of stories. And what it does is it gives a false impression. And it really gives a false impression. And I think I've shared this on this podcast before, Anika. But one of the ways I know definitively, dispositively, that this is giving a false impression is I'll have students, oftentimes very capable students, and they'll get their first college acceptance and they'll act like, oh, what a relief. I'm going to college. And I realized that there was this latent fear in the back of their mind that they were going to get shut out and not get in anywhere. And that's crazy because, if I'm building a list with someone, it's going to be a balanced list and they're going to get in multiple schools on their list. So there's just fear out there that it's extremely hard to get into college. And, we talk a lot about the fact in this particular chapter that it's absolutely true that there are 100 colleges that admit only 1/3 or fewer of their applicants. Okay. But that's only 3.5% of the 4-year schools out there. And they gobble up 95% of the publicity. And the reason why that's the buzz, Anika, is because that's a sexy story. First of all, people have heard about those schools. Okay. If you have articles on Stanford and Penn and Duke and Yale and all of that, people have heard about that. But if you say Bazooka College is it taking 8 out of every 10 kids? So why don't you apply to Bazooka College? That's not clickbait. That's not headline stuff. That doesn't sell magazines and sell papers. And so that's really what it boils down to. So the whole media motive is generating clicks and selling papers, right? So if you go with the household names, that story will generate sales for you. So that's what drives things. Does that explain to you why you don't hear that the overwhelming majority of colleges are not selective and that 67% is the national acceptance rate and somewhere between 90% of colleges are not that selective? And you just don't hear that much about that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you asked the question, I don't get it. It should be opposite. Did I explain to you why it isn't the opposite, or are you still confused on that?
I mean, no, I totally get it. It's silly to me. I mean, shame on you, media. Well, I shouldn't say shame because I know y'all are catching it right now, but but still, it's just, I don't know. It's just me. But yes, I do get it. I understand. Clickbait.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. Sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Yeah, and one of the things I say in this article is I encourage people to Google June 29, 2017 Business Week article titled College Enrollment Has Plummeted and Private Universities Are Scrambling. And we're going to talk about this a lot more, Nick, because sometimes I fear that we're perpetuating the same thing in our podcast. Because a lot of times when we're talking about all the different intricacies of holistic admission, and if you're looking at certain schools, you better have stratospheric scores and every rigorous class, and you know what I mean? It'll make you sound like your kid almost needs to be perfect. Like, I want to make sure we're not doing that we're presenting the balanced side. What are your thoughts? You're one for honesty. How do you feel we've struck that balance? Like, when
I feel the same way. I do want us to be more focused on just what you just said. But there is a reality of those schools, of those, highly selective schools. They still exist. They're still a thing.
Well, it's not just they still exist. There's interest in there. Like if I was to take a survey of all of our listeners and I was to say, what schools would you want me to do a college spotlight on? The answers that are going to come back are going to be, it's not going to be the bazooka colleges. It's going to be the brand names. So, like, that's why we even us, we try to strike a balance between talking about some of them and then talking about underrated gems, that go uncovered.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're talking about college admissions as well, when we're talking about admission strategy, like, here's the dilemma, okay? 90% of colleges are not selective, but particularly for upper middle class or upper class families, highly educated families, those are not the schools that people are aspiring to get into. They're just not.
Right.
And even if people feel like they got a decent education as a parent and they've got really good jobs and their education has served them well, the college admission process, particularly for upper class and upper middle class, they kind of look at it the way people think of as the American dream. In other words, financially, people sort of want their children to have an easier lifestyle and be better off than their experience was financially. And that's how they look at college admissions. Like, okay, I went to a really good state school. I think I got a good education, but I just want something better for my kids. And that's how people think. And I don't want to criticize that, but we try to.
Yeah, but here's what I want more for our audience to take away is what I take away every time we have these conversations every week is that Janaea is not looking at highly selective schools, period. Like, she's just not. But I still want her to apply this same approach in what she's doing and what she is going after. You can still apply these things to other institutions.
Correct.
So I get it. It's about how to get in, but it's also about life.
Correct.
It's also about doing your best.
Yeah.
And, training for the marathon, even though you're doing a 10K. So
exactly.
That's what I want us to convey to all of y'all is that. Like, you're going to excel. I mean, you can go to a highly selective school and not do well. But you can also go to a lower selective school and bang it out and be really successful. And there's proof of that. And I can't remember the name of the book that you talk about, Mark, the one where the guy talks about
Where You Go Is Not Who You'll Be by Frank Bruni.
Yeah. That. So, that's what I want us to
yeah, and it's a balance. I mean, this stuff is so hard to convey the nuance, right? Like, name recognition matters, but I always say it doesn't matter as much as people think it matters. But to say it doesn't matter is not correct. And it matters more in certain majors. It matters more in certain cities, And so striking the right balance on conveying that, there's some value, but I feel in general, I feel it's a very much an overrated value. But then what I've learned is for some people, the question is not about will it generate a better job or will I make more money? It's also about social status too. Like, will I enter into a different social network, Right. And that's important to a lot of people. And so trying to strike that balance is always a little tricky. And, I'm a big believer in match and fit. I respect the fact Janaea is a very, very, very good student. She could compete in a lot of highly competitive applicant pools and do extremely well. But she's an example of the fact that you don't always just have to go to the most selective school. You just don't always have to do that because that's how most people think. They're constantly trying to reach for something they can't quite get. And so how do we get off here? We got way on in left field.
I don't think so.
No?
I think it's totally relevant. Even though I forgot what we were talking about.
funny.
Yeah. Oh yeah, media hype. Selective schools getting all the attention.
Well,
And
because the incentive of the media is, when it comes to this, is to generate readership or sell magazines or clicks, right? And is
Mhm.
not necessarily to dispel misperceptions. But that's what the media doesn't get right, is the fact that it's a buyer's market, it's not a seller's market. And the overwhelming majority of schools out there, they would love to have an average, well-behaved kid. They really would, you know? And, maybe another thing the media doesn't get right, too, is kind of the corollary of that is you don't have to go to one of those schools to have a productive life, right? Because that's kind of the
Right.
inference. Like, we're obsessing on
Yep.
that, and obsessing on that implies there's incredible value there. And I think more stories need to be told. A couple of weeks ago, for the recommended resource of the week, I mean, what did I do? I listed all the colleges that Harvard undergrads went to for undergrad that people have never even heard of. And it was a pretty long list. And I did that intentionally because I think, honestly, a lot of people feel like, well, if I want to go on to do something like a Harvard Law School, I better go to like Yale undergrad,
Right.
So
Yep.
let's move on, though. I think we covered the topic.
Moving on.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Hilary, part 2.
Hey, Hilary, again.
I'm still feeling guilty I blew Hilary off and didn't read her email. I'm going to have to reach out to Hilary and say, Hilary, how about a trifecta? Can you send us a third email? Just do it for me, just to assuage my guilty conscience.
No, don't do that, Hilary. But here we are again.
What are you trying to say? You don't like Hilary's questions?
I love Hilary's questions. And I'm going to read this one. It says, because our school is unique, and because my daughters want to be sure admissions officers have an accurate understanding of their school context, and because our school counselor position seems to be a revolving door, my older daughter has started reaching out to regional admissions officers from colleges where she plans to apply, and she has invited them to visit her high school. The school is relatively new and has never had a strong college counseling program, so most admissions officers she's encountered haven't heard of the school. Is this a good strategy, or does it make her a thick file, thick kid applicant?
Ooh, I'm impressed with the thick file thin. This is
right.
I mean, is she listening to us, or whether she's getting this? Because we've talked about that, or she's getting it elsewhere. Either way, I'm impressed. So, first of all, let me just get right to it. I think it's an absolutely fantastic idea. Colleges love it when students reach out because they know that, this is not going to be a total bust of a visit because I've got somebody on the other end that's like excited about meeting with me, and so, in fact, I've kind of used this approach with some of the students I work with, Anika, where I've had them reach out to and email schools and say, are you going to visit us this year? Because, what I try to do is I'll tell a student, I said, look, can you pull together like 4 people, 3 other people besides yourself that have interest in school XYZ, because you're already interested in it. I know the school doesn't visit you. And reach out and to contact the regional manager in your area and say, myself and 3 other students would love an opportunity to meet with you. Is it possible for you to add us to your fall travel, your spring travel? And it's been very effective. So I think I love the idea. Why do you think I love it?
Well, it's just all that you just said. And that's just so impressive that she's putting forth that extra effort. I mean, that school needs to be considering a career for her a few years from now. But it's just a matter of, I don't know. I feel like you covered it.
Well, so let's talk about all the things involved in this. So one, you've got what I said in terms of, okay, as an admissions counselor, I now know that I'm walking into an environment that's probably going to be worth my time. But there's something else there as well, which we haven't talked about. It's my job to get to know my territory. I know there's lots of schools in my territory I don't know that well, and I'm intellectually curious. I don't want to miss any potential any potential feeder source for me. I always got extremely excited when I was on the road recruiting, and I was what we call a road warrior. I was on the road a lot, and I loved it. I love that. I missed that part of admissions. I loved learning about new schools. That was always extremely exciting to me. I just loved it. I just did. I was always curious what they were like, what their culture was like, and who's there that could help my school. So there will be a lot of interest there. Now, listen, this is important. Every school is different. So let's talk about the extreme. So we have schools with no money, no budget. They don't do any kind of travel, hardly any at all, right? That's one extreme. Then we have all the way to the other extreme, like, the MITs and the Princetons and the Harvards. They rarely do school visits. Nick, I'm extremely excited because I will be at Pennsylvania, back at Westtown School for 4 days, going back to the college fair I started there really started planning in 2003. That happens every other year. I'm going back for that fair. And all those schools come there, but they come because it's a wide assortment of gifted and talented kids coming from all over. But a lot of those schools wouldn't even come just to do school visits, even that it's 100% college prep with really gifted and talented kids. Like, probably half the Ivy League would come, but the other half wouldn't, but they'll come for something like that. So the point is, you can't, and the reason I'm going into some detail here is you can't expect everybody to come because you have so many extremes when it comes to visiting. You have people that don't have any budget at all for that kind of thing, so they're not coming regardless. And then you have, hey, when I met with MIT last week, because MIT did do a school visit for us, and that's rare. And I'm like, hey, we pick and choose where we go. It's very rare. We don't have to go anywhere. Like, you have these schools that they've got such name recognition that generally what they do is they tend to form a little bit of a consortium, and they'll go to a hotel and blast it out to all the college counselors and say, look, we're going to be at the Marriott. Counselors, send your kids there, and they can go to the Marriott and get 500 people. That's what the highly selectives do. The most highly selectives. The very, very, very selective, but not that highly selective, they still want to go drum up interest. So the point I'm making is it's not going to work for every school. But one thing you can do as a little tip is you can go on to a college's website and you can look at what their travel plans are. And you can see which ones are planning on being in your area. And if they're planning on coming to your area and you do that, you've got a great chance. And here's the other thing. You want to reach out early because the travel season starts either in August in the southern states and September in the northern states. But the planning for that, those decisions are being made in like May, June, July, right? And into August in terms of where you're going to go. So you don't want to send something like this out too late. What are you thinking, Anika?
I think kudos to Hilary's daughter. Excellent work.
Yeah, no. There's absolutely no downside at all. Colleges love initiators. This is a great way to show off. I mean, I know she's doing it to meet a representative and to learn more about the school, but it's also a great way to show that you're an initiator, which is a very, very valued trait. So keep it up, Hilary, and your daughter. Okay, friends, this is one of my personal favorite interviews. I hope you're enjoying it, with Peter Van Buskirk, over 40 years of experience, and he is shooting straight with us. In part 3, we'll talk about how colleges flip students from early action to early decision. Peter talks about varsity blues, and he explained how something like this happened and why it didn't surprise him. He'll also talk about being at Franklin and Marshall when they went test optional and share a couple true stories about test optional students from his experience. And finally, Peter makes a compelling case why he does not believe there is any such thing as need blind. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
A new one that I've seen that's emerged in the last couple of years is schools that have early decision, and then they also add early action, or maybe they add another round, in there. And then they reach out to the early action people who they defer initially and say, look, if you want to flip from EA to ED, there's a spot for you. I mean, Tulane was very outspoken publicly that they picked up 95 kids doing that this year.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. Early action does not involve a commitment from the student. Early action is an opportunity for the student to send in the application early in the calendar process to get feedback from the institution, will I be admitted or not, which is peace of mind at the very least. Now, I want to contrast the way early decision and early action are used by schools. When a student applies early decision to a college or university, the reaction of the admission officer is this: if we think we might admit him in the regular admission process, we'll admit him in early decision.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to bend their expectations qualitatively.
Mm-hmm.
The student has a discernible advantage through early decision. And in fact, in some cases, in some schools, the fact that the students applied early decision can improve his or her chances by 20 to 25%.
Mm-hmm.
Early action, however, brings a different response. When the reader of the application looks at an early action application, the question is going to be this: if he were to be a regular decision candidate for us, do we know with absolute certainty that he would be one of our very best? If we know he would be one of our very best, then we're going to go ahead and take him early action. So basically, in early action, colleges are cherry picking the top of the candidate pool. So now, to your point, your initial point, we've just cherry picked the top of our candidate pool, and it's still November, December of the application process. Why don't we go back to those kids that we just took early action and say, hey, you know what? You've been admitted. Would you like to commit? We could make this a pretty sweet deal for you. And it works.
Yeah. What I struggle with, here, Peter, is the pressure on the admission office to do these things, because most admissions counselors that I meet, really good people, right? Like they go into this to help people. They either love students, like the idea of working with this age group and playing a role in shaping their future. Maybe they also love their own institution and they want to help it. But these pressures are real. And I've shared this before some time on the podcast. It's not necessarily something I'm proud of, and I was doing boarding school admissions. I was in Northern Virginia, in a pretty Tony upscale suburb. And it was a reception we were doing. And 3 different parents came up to me and said, what's your acceptance rate at this event? And at that time we were 52%. And I could clearly tell they were saying, are you low enough for me to be interested in your school for my student? And I remember coming back to the office and saying, you know what? I honestly think if our acceptance rate was maybe in the 30s, we'd get some of these families.
Yep.
And, I'm in this for the right reason, to help people. But now I'm feeling this type of pressure to drive down this acceptance rate because it will help me to enroll some of the kids that I think can help our school more. And so what can be done to keep some of these business pressures from sort of corrupting some of the tactics?
That's a good question, because that's where we are in our industry now. Is an industry, the college-going process has been corrupted by a culture of greed, entitlement, privilege that emanates from the most selective institutions in the country. And the sad thing is that if you're not among the most selective institutions in the country, if you're close, you want to be one of them. So you're doing the things that you need to do in order to become like the others. Mm-hmm. And that's why we have the varsity blues. That's why we have the scandals that erupted this last spring. Those things aren't new. The kind of, now, we may not have seen quite as much in terms of bribery and that sort of thing, but falsification of test results, people taking the exams for kids, that's been going on for a long time. And perhaps there's been evidence of money being put on the line to get a kid into a particular program, or falsification of credentials, people photoshopping the images into the crew photos, etc. It may have been happening even beyond this, but this is happening because institutions are making it possible to happen. Mm-hmm. They created this notion that, we really are the best. So now you've got a population of parents in particular who believe they can't face their friends if their kids aren't going to one of the best.
But there's pressure, though, right? If a school sees a precipitous drop in rankings or in applications, it becomes harder and harder and harder to enroll kids that you need. Mm-hmm. So how does an institution not play the games? And the games could be the recruit to reject games, the let's manipulate the rankings games. We could go on and on with all of the different tactics that are involved in order to try to elevate your status in the eyes of the public because everything seems like it's judged based on status, not fit and match.
That's the $64 million question. I liken what we have found ourselves in as a perfect storm. A confluence of different environmental factors have brought us to this point over the last 35 to 40 years. And the energy that this storm is generating right now around the college-going process is so strong that nobody really has any mooring anymore. And basically what you find are individuals within institutions and individuals outside of institutions just trying to kind of keep their head above water. And, within the institutions, there seems to be some shelter because the institutions provide that shelter. So you do what the institutions want you to do in order to maintain that shelter.
And it's amazing.
I don't know if the metaphor is working or not.
Yeah,
but,
it's amazing how so few schools are exempt from this too, because an article came out earlier this year. Some of the most selective schools in the country, like the U Chicago's and others on there, extending their date to which they would accept applications this year. And we know that it wasn't necessarily because, they're not going to fail without doing that. That had to be an attempt to want to be able to present your data in a more compelling way.
Exactly. And there are other things that have happened. I mean, some of those schools have decided to become test optional. Now, I am a fan of test option. I think it's a great opportunity for a lot of young people. But when the school is already admitting 5 or 10% of its applicants and they're going test optional, there can only be one reason that they're going test optional.
Yeah. Why don't you explain this? Because this, we've talked about this, Peter. Talk about the test optional game in terms of the rationale that's often given versus the motive often behind it.
Well, and unfortunately, the two are sometimes touch each other.
Right. Because sometimes they're well-intentioned, but motives are mixed.
I was at Franklin and Marshall when we became test optional.
Right.
And that whole process was frankly very liberating because prior to being test optional, there were countless situations in the admission process where we'd be looking at candidates who were very, very interesting to us. And then someone would raise the question, well, if we take him, what will his scores look like on our profile? Mm-hmm. Literally, that's exactly the conversation. Well, that's enough then to say to the reader, okay, we'll put him on the wait list or we'll deny him. So test scores were arbitrarily used to suppress the participation of a lot of kids in the process.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
The recommended resource for episode 92 is an article that Jed Applerouth wrote about the changes to the ACT that I thought was just spot on. Now, we had Jed Applerouth, founder of Applerouth Tutoring and Test Prep, as our guest interview on episodes 28 and 29, where he discussed the differences between the SAT and the ACT. But what Jed does in this article is he gives the feedback from the test prep pros on his team that he surveyed about whether this is a good change or a bad change. Jed mentions many of the points that Anika and I discussed here, but he elaborates on the history of the ACT moving to the digital testing. He talks about the cost savings by having the ACT super score, and he delves a lot deeper into what it's going to mean to allow students to take the test in a single administration, which he says by far and away is the most significant change. And I would agree with him of this new rollout. Here is a quote from Jed in the article. Forcing students to take whole tests may have protected some of them from their perfectionist tendencies. Without some boundaries, students may continue to work on raising a particular section score long after they should have moved on to other things. And here's Jed's overall verdict on whether this is a good move or a bad move by the ACT. This policy may benefit students, but it also has the potential to cause harm. Time will tell how this new policy affects students, equity and access, admissions, and the broader testing landscape. We will link this excellent article in our show notes. Well, I'll tell you a true Franklin and Marshall story. When I was at Westtown doing college admissions, we sent a kid over to Franklin and Marshall, and Franklin and Marshall really liked the kid, but didn't like the test scores, and gave us feedback that, if this kid could apply test optional, it could increase the chances. And so the kid flipped to test optional and got admitted.
Well, right. And what's interesting about that, and I was probably there at the time, we knew we had confidence in the kid's ability to do the work. That
Right.
wasn't the question.
Yeah.
And we liked him well enough. I think I know who it was. We liked him
Good memory.
well enough that we wanted to have a shot at him, but we
Right.
also realized that, it's the profile thing. And the
Right.
profile is the information we provide to the world that describes the students who just enrolled. So we found that he was a much more palatable candidate for us if we didn't have to report his scores. And it's the guy I'm thinking about. He was admitted, enrolled, was a fantastic student, and has had a fantastically successful career upon leaving the college as well. So it was a great story. I remember another young person that we were able to admit because we were test optional, who had never taken the SAT. His PSAT was 400 points below our average, and he was homeless. And when we were able to kind of sort through all of his background and story, there was a much stronger impulse to want to give him an opportunity than there was to say, we're not going to bother with this. And we could have blamed it on no SAT, not low, but no SAT. And we took him, and long story short there is he didn't graduate from our place. He transferred to Johns Hopkins, got a bachelor's degree in English literature there, a master's from Fordham, and a PhD from NYU. So this isn't a question of are we taking kids who don't belong there. It's a matter of, I believe, by going test optional, we were able to reach out to kids who would not have been able to touch us otherwise.
I think it's a great story, though, Peter, because it shows sort of all aspects of this, right? So it shows here you are in admissions to help people, want to make a difference in someone's life, see someone who you feel you can help, someone who also can help your institution. Don't believe all the hype about test scores. You have enough sophisticated ways to be able to evaluate an applicant that you have confidence that the kid can do well. So you do the right thing and reach out and say, here's a way we can make this possible. But at the same time, you also feel a certain pressure to protect the profile. And that just shows, and by the profile, for those who are listening, we're talking about the statistical profile that schools release every year, where they show their average test scores, acceptance rates, all kinds of different data points can be on there. But it shows that it wasn't so much that your ego was so driven that, gee, if the profile is, not as sexy as I'd like it to be, my ego's going to be bruised. It was more, this could have repercussions for our ability to attract some of the other students that we really want to get if we're seen because, like it or not, this, when the public sees higher average test scores, they tend to think the school is a better school, right or wrong. Like I've been fighting that for 20 plus years and unsuccessful so far.
All part of the marketing.
Yeah. But I think it shows the pressure, though, that admissions offices are under to have to do certain things to make themselves look good.
Yeah. I'm glad we went test optional. And at that time, we were not marketing heavily on the test option piece. And frankly, I don't know what the college, I know the college continues to be test optional now, but I don't know the extent to which it's part of the marketing effort. But it gave us an opportunity to consider worthy candidates that we would otherwise have dismissed out of hand. So the test option, I think, is something to consider there. My concern, Mark, is this, that a lot of the very selective institutions are saying things publicly that are disingenuous. Test option can be one of them. Now, when they say we're going test optional, the implicit message is we're reaching out to students who are coming from disadvantaged backgrounds. Similarly, when they say we are not going to require any loans of students coming from families with incomes, lower middle incomes, what are they saying? That's an invitation to apply, isn't it?
Right.
My kid can go to XYZ school free because, we don't have any money and whatever financial aid he gets is all going to be in scholarship because they're not going to give any loans. Well, that's incredibly disingenuous because it means nothing for the students who are applying. Those schools making those statements are simply saying, we're going to treat better the students who already enroll. We're not going to bring in more of you. We're just going to treat those of you who come better. When they say we're need blind in the admission process, what does that mean?
Yeah, that's something I know has been a pet peeve of yours for a while. Why don't you, we've had conversations about that on more than one occasion. Why don't you talk about that? Explain what it is when schools say that and why you don't buy it.
Well, need-blind admission is a time-honored notion that says that colleges and universities should, or in the minds of many people, must consider students for admission without regard to their family financial circumstance. So basically, they're saying, we look only at the academic record, not the bank record. And it's a great idea. It really is. And it's an idea that was kind of born out of the 1970s by a group of highly selective schools that wanted to make a statement about access. Back to that in a moment. Need-blind admission, in my mind, is an absolute concept. It's something that applies to every student in every circumstance of the process all the time. Not most of them, most of the time, all of them all the time. So should there be any exceptions along the way, we're not need blind. And I've had instances where I've been on panels with representatives from other institutions, and the reps will introduce themselves as coming from need blind institutions. And I'll say, are you really need blind? Oh, yeah, we're need blind. You need blind all the time? Yep, all the time. All the time? Well, we're not need blind when we go to the wait list. We're not need blind when we deal with international students. We're not need blind when we deal with transfer students. You're not need blind because you found exceptions. And frankly, the exceptions don't end there.
It's funny, when you and I first started talking about this was one of the things I didn't agree with you on, because I was thinking, no, there are legitimately times when people are reading an application and they're not looking at the bank account. But as I started thinking of all the ramifications, I think one of the things that started to sway me over to your view is the strategy that goes into where you recruit. Even some of the wealthiest schools that claim that they're need blind, in order to do that, they have to target affluent areas in their recruitment just to be able to have enough people that won't be applying for financial aid.
Yeah, think about the volatility of the admission process if you don't have a handle on the control of how much money you bring in and where it's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have that view. Now, here's a way that I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but I think that the coup de grace here is this. The schools that are claiming to be need blind are nonprofit institutions.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the fiscal year, they need to provide operating budgets to the federal government. And the operating budgets need to show that they're not bringing in more money than they put into the program. If they bring in more money than they put into the program, they got a problem. They're for profit.
Mm-hmm.
So they're constantly trying to show that their lines meet.
Mm-hmm.
One of the largest, if not the largest line item in these budgets will be financial aid.
Right.
Now, to be need blind means that you're not paying any attention to how much money is in that budget. Do you think the federal government will be forgiving of an institution that says, well, we don't know if we're going to spend $150 million or $200 million in financial aid this year? Because that's what need blind admission means.
Mm-hmm.
There will be a bottom line for financial aid, and there will be an accountability for bottom line. And that's why it's impossible.
Right. Basically, what you're saying is you can't run an operating budget without being able to project what your aid budget is. And you can't control your aid budget unless certain intentional things are done on the front end, whether it's where you recruit or, many other things that you've mentioned.
Well, back to the reason that this came up. Those institutions, those highly selective institutions, 40 plus years ago, who said we're need blind in the admission process, have been wearing that as a badge of honor. Like, we're doing it the right way. Watch out for the rest of those guys. I am not aware that there has been any time in the last 40 plus years that those institutions have been audited for evidence that they're need blind. In other words, as long as they say they're need blind, they're need blind. They don't have to prove a thing. And that's where this becomes really, really sketchy.
Well, one thing I've noticed, and you've seen this too, there's been a status that's been associated with being need blind. And
Absolutely.
what that has led schools to do is to claim they're need blind when they really, really, really weren't need blind. And some of them have come out, Haverford, Wesleyan, and some others have come out and said, we're going to be need aware or need sensitive for a certain portion of their applicant pool. And in some cases, they took tremendous heat from the public. Oh my goodness, how could you do that?
Yep.
But I always commended them because I felt like at least it was truth in advertising.
Exactly. And that's what we don't have so much. We don't have that truth in advertising.
Next week in the news, colleges rethink athletic special admissions in wake of indictments. And we'll be in chapter 93 of 171 answers. And we'll talk about how you and your child can keep from going crazy from the college admissions process. And next week's question is from a college counselor who asked Mark to address how opting to not share test scores at test optional institutions can actually be harmful when it comes to students who need merit aid. And Mark wraps up his interview with Mr. Peter Van Buskirk and understanding how colleges act as businesses in ways that are not in your best interest, part 4.
Okay, Anika, college spotlight time. The University of Kentucky. This school would be one of the schools on the list for radical transformations. This is not your yesteryear's University of Kentucky. Take a guess how much money they have spent on campus upgrades, Anika, in the last decade and a half. Want to take a guess?
Minimal?
No. 2.3 billion. When I said
Wait, did you say million or
no,
billion?
billion. 2.3 billion. When I say they're not your granddad's University of Kentucky, radical transformation. So they are investing, and they're investing big to try to really truly be a national, international school. 30,000 students. They're a tier 1 research heavy flagship school for the state of Kentucky. 1 hour from Louisville. They're in central Kentucky. Lexington, the second biggest in the state. They're in the SEC. So that's the Southeastern Conference. That is the creme de la creme when you're looking at athletes for football and other sports as well. 32% of students come out of state. It's a mostly white institution. 8% Black, 5% Latinx, 3% Asian, 3% international. So about, 75, close to 80% Caucasian. No minimum SAT or ACT, but that's just no official cutoff. Average ACT is about a 26. So that's the 83rd percentile. Business students get their own housing, and they also have a study abroad feature that's built in for any business major, which is really kind of cool. And business is one of their strongest majors. Accounting is strong, management, entrepreneurship, and marketing. They've got a really cool Shark Tank on campus where you can make your own pitch and start your own company with investors right there, which is really cool. Communications is another strong major, and they've got a really, really, really particularly strong major. It's called Integrated Strategic Communications. And what that does is it combines business, communications, public relation, advertising, and marketing all into one, which is really cool. They participate in what's known as the Academic Common Market, which allows you to go to Kentucky for in-state tuition if they're offering a major that is not offered in your state and you're in one of 16 states in their consortium. Pre-law is also strong. You get a special pre-law advisor plus your own regular advisor. And one thing that's really cool is if you're, accelerating your classes, you can actually start law school right there in your senior year, which is pretty awesome. They've got a VA hospital on campus, and a lot of students will work there. So that's very common. And you can come in as an undecided. So if you want to do that, that's fine. They've got a whole exploratory track if you want to come in that way. And then you will have to take 2 years of Jed Ed classes, or general education classes, but that's okay. And then you can pick a major after that. For dual enrollment, they're more generous than a lot of schools. They will accept a decent amount of dual enrollment credits compared to, some of your schools like last week, MIT, they're not taking any dual enrollment credits, okay? You might get to possibly opt out of a class that's required, but they're not giving you actual credit. Study abroad's big, Anika. Partnerships with over 70 different countries and a couple hundred programs. Housing. Now, housing is something else at Kentucky. Part of this $2.3 billion went to housing. They built 14 residence halls pretty recently.
Wow.
And the oldest one's 14 years old. The newer ones are 3 years old. And Anika, they went state of the art. Remember way back at the start of our podcast when we did a lazy river thing?
I remember that.
Yeah, lazy river.
I actually thought of that when you said that amount.
Really? Oh, 2.3 billion?
Right.
Well, I think Kentucky's trying to have the lazy river version with their dorms. So check this out. And I love this rep, by the way, Christina. She's a regional area. She's awesome. It was a great hire. She's amazing. She made a statement. She said, "I dare you to show me another college campus where everybody gets a Tempur-Pedic mattress. They all got the Tempur-Pedic mattresses, but some of it is their local headquarters isn't that far, so they got a really good deal. But they also, a lot of these new residence halls have the granite countertops and a lot of the bells and the whistles. So,
Oh my goodness. Wow.
so if housing is like one thing that's important to you, they've got it. And big rooms too, especially upper class rooms with the closet space and the fridge and all that. They've got a really nice internal transportation system with their own shuttle. They got the whole electronic scooters, the bikes, the shuttle, their own internal Uber system, which is great. Obviously, they're in the SEC, so we're talking about big-time sports. And everybody, the first thing they think of is John Calipari and basketball because it's bluegrass. It's like that's basketball country. But do you know their number one sport is women's cheer?
Really?
It's not in terms of revenue, but 24 championships. It's been their most successful program, more than men's basketball. Yep, they're the dominant. And that, a lot of times in the North or even in the West and Midwest, they don't realize how competitive cheer is in the South. Like, cheer is a sport in the South, And so, so they compete and win cheer a lot. 17 of their 24 sports are ranked. 29% of students go Greek there. One thing that's really important is December 1st. That deadline carries a lot of weight. It's the deadline for their honors college, their competitive academic scholarships, and their early action deadline. December 1st, December 1st, December 1st. Do not miss it. Very, very important. And one thing that's great about the University of Kentucky is, I don't know if you've heard me say this, Anika, that a lot of times flagship out-of-state schools don't usually give the largest scholarship offers. Do you remember me saying that before?
Vaguely.
Vaguely? Well, it's normally true. But the University of Kentucky is an exception. They have some extremely generous merit scholarships for high-achieving out-of-state students. I mean, they have a Singletary and a Patterson that can be incredibly generous. They also have a Bluegrass scholarship, of course, named Bluegrass, right? That's an automatic scholarship. So if you've got certain, of course, like a lot of schools, a certain GPA and test score, right? They will automatically give you one of 3 Bluegrass scholarships at different levels, depending on how strong your academic profile is. But if you really want to get into some major money, then you're going to have to submit an application for the Singletary and the Patterson. And I mean, these things can get quite generous. They can be so good, they can beat you staying at your in-state local school. That's how generous they can get.
Wow.
Yeah, no, they've got a really nice honors college. You're going to have to take 8 or 9 additional classes that are going to be more rigorous. You're going to have to do a thesis, but you're going to get first choice of courses and you're going to get first choice of housing. One of the criticisms is that sometimes it has been hard for certain students to get courses, which has made it graduating on time a little more challenging. And some of the intro level classes can be, humongous in terms of size. Large alumni network. As far as super strong programs, they're really a powerhouse in anything in the medical field. Like they're a powerhouse. Nursing, health sciences, pre-med, pre-pharmacy. They're one of the few schools, and they've got every single school on their campus. So they've got the dental school, they've got the law school, they've got the med school, they've got the pharmacy school. So they've got the strong pre-vet, pre-med, pre-law, and pre-dental. They've got a huge statewide hospital facility right there, immediately right there that you can get involved in. And neurology is also strong. Another strong major would be engineering. And anything in the College of Agriculture is going to be really strong as well. And when you're in Lexington, when you think of Lexington, what do you think of, Anika?
I don't, because I have never ventured in that area. So I'm like, ooh, wonder what that's like.
So Joy used to have to go there for a big basketball tournament every year. So I would get down there for basketball tournaments, when she was doing AAU. But so when people think of Lexington, they're normally going to think of John Calipari, men's basketball, or Kentucky Fried Chicken. And then even more than that, Kentucky Derby and just the whole horse culture in Kentucky. That's huge. And so this won't surprise you. They have an amazing equine science program. You got to take advantage of what's in your area. Guess what else they have? A very, very strong pre-vet program.
Ooh.
And the last thing I want to share, which I think is so cool, is they do this massive fundraiser. And it's like one of the biggest fundraisers that students do anywhere in the country. It's like this whole entire year. And a lot of the student bodies involved in it. And what they're doing is they're raising money for like a local children's health charity every year. And it culminates with this 24-hour dance-a-thon to celebrate all the money that they're raising. Isn't that? I thought that's so cool. It's called of course, you know, they're known as Big Blue Nation with their blue colors, right? So, you know what the name of the dance-a-thon is called?
Blue Dance.
Oh, very close. Dance Blue. So shout out to the University of Kentucky. Just wanted to make them our college spotlight of the week. Anika, I cannot wait to go back to Pennsylvania and be on my old turf. Yeah, fly out in 2 days and I'll be there for 4 days. So I'll let you know how it went.
Safe travels.
Awesome. Have a good week.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. And if you found this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that could really use this information. Your College Bound Kid is produced by John Lockenbaugh. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Artwork is by Andrea Togo. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. If you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340.
And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like for us to answer on the show, please email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. That's questions with an S at yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions, so send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, which is just simply yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.